Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about a very dangerous topic. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee and a fire extinguisher, and let's go. This is made possible by our esteemed colleague, Drew. Drew actually also has a YouTube channel with quite nice content on it, so I will link to that in the description below. Definitely worth checking out. High quality videos and a different perspective as well. Hi, Drew.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Thank you again for hooking this up. Very much appreciated.
Absolutely. Glad to have you guys here today. It's fantastic. Can't wait to see this thing smoke up.
Now, before we get into the meat of the video, there are a couple of disclaimers that I have to go over. They are very important. Under no circumstances should you try to reproduce these tests. A lithium-ion battery fire is inherently very dangerous, very hazardous, and very destructive. All the testing done for this video was planned weeks in advance. An extensive amount of research was done, not only for the testing setup itself, but also for safety contingencies for both myself, the tester, and anyone around the testing site. Also, the test was done on a secure piece of private property, far away from any hazards, and every precaution was taken to ensure the relative safety of everyone around. The second disclaimer has to do with the product itself. I reached out to Nobleman Tech for this fireproof bag. I wanted to test it, I wanted to see if it would actually work, and so I sought them out, messaged them with my idea of a test, explained what the idea of the test was, and requested that they send me a review unit. Therefore, this unit was provided by Nobleman Tech for free. I did not pay for it. The bag was free. Now, going into this whole plan, I very much wanted this thing to work, and that would have been good for everyone involved. That all being said, while the bag itself was free, the entire testing procedure and everything having to do with this video was not cheap, and therefore, there you go. All right, so while the rest of the cells are charging, there are a few more left so I can finish taping up the packs. I figured I'd walk you through the testing setup. So specifically, these are Sanyo GAs. They are all fully charged. These have never been used. A couple of them have had to have been rewrapped, so that's why they're a different color. And they are set up in a way that the positive poles are facing outward. Those are facing what will be unsheathed. So tomorrow for the test, I will remove the wrap and remove this outer protector so the lipos are bare. So it will be going into two bare lipos, which are also now fully charged. So the jets of flame from the positive ends will go directly into the bare lipos, which should, considering the force and proximity to the lipos, it should set these off nearly immediately, which means that this bin will either immediately melt or immediately fly apart from the violent explosion of both the lithium ions and the lipos. I am using a series of cartridge heaters. All right, so these 5 cartridge heaters are wired in series. I soldered them end to end, which means that we can run them at the 2 amps of current that one would take and just increase the voltage to deal with the daisy chain. And so once this is all done and I'm setting up the actual test, I will slide them in here, and so that way they sit evenly touching the negative ends of each cell. So this bin will be closed. Sitting atop will be the skateboard deck, as it were. And underneath the fire bag will be a large, very large cardboard box just to check for scorching. Tried to secure some carpet pieces. That did not work. And so just to check for heat under the bag during this test, we'll just have to see what happens to a cardboard box. Holy shit. And now that we've got all that out of the way, we're just going to go ahead and watch the video of the test. And after we see that and have taken that all in, we will then break down what happened, why I think it happened, and what that all means. So without further ado, here is the test of the Nobleman Tech Fireproof Bag. Called it. Called it. Yeah. So those are the cells going up. That's the residual heat. So those are individual cells now going after they're getting cooked.
It's only 5 minutes into it too.
That was quicker than I thought.
Yeah.
You know what? It's probably because in the previous test, they were out in the open. Whoa.
Yeah, we're only.
Yeah, that was a cell. The bag didn't work. It failed. It failed the test. And so why do I think that happened? Now, looking at it and reviewing the footage back, you end up getting some information that you really only can get from testing things like this. Similarly to any safety device, you really only learn its actual safety capacity when you test it until failure, and we certainly have reached failure of this particular safety device. And so, the cause of the initial failure, the breaking of the seam, the bag basically popped. When cells enter thermal runaway, and we will talk about what that actually is later, when cells enter thermal runaway, they off-gas. The chemistry inside the cell breaks down, it decomposes, and it vents out. Cells have a venting disc at the positive end. Very few cells have a disc at the negative end, but either way, they have a venting disc, and when pressure builds from decomposition, gas is ejected, literally ejected, out of the cell. And this is because solid and liquid matter inside the cell becomes a gas. And that gas is forcefully ejected out of the cells with heat and flame and all that fun stuff. Now you can actually have up to 2 liters of gas per amp hour of capacity in any given battery pack. So the amount of actual gas being produced during a thermal runaway event really does depend on, of course, the size of the battery and then how many of the cells end up entering thermal runaway and at what stages, because as you likely saw in the clip, it didn't all happen at once. There were large clusters of cells that would expel gas, melt down, burn off, and jet flames, and then some time would pass, and then the residual heat inside the bag or inside whatever battery compartment that the PEV has, it would cook the rest of the cells, and then that cluster would then go into thermal runaway, and then the ejecta out of the cells could hit another group of cells adjacent to it in a battery pack, and then that would cause that to overheat. And so thermal runaway becomes very much a cascading event. And it's for this reason that the airtight design of the bag simply doesn't work. In fact, in an effort to create an airtight bag that would ostensibly starve the flames of burning material, you almost guarantee that the bag during the off-gassing phase, when the cells start to break down, will just inflate rapidly and pop. It's also very important to note that the chemistry in most of the common lithium-ion cells used in electric skateboards, Onewheels, scooters, e-bikes, EUCs, whatever. These contain oxygen within the chemistry of the cells themselves. And so the idea of starving a flame doesn't apply to a thermal runaway event in a common lithium-ion battery pack. Once the chemistry inside the cell decomposes, the oxygen is freed up, and that is used to continue the combustion of the cells in a very fiery way. And now I've mentioned thermal runaway. So what exactly is it? Once a cell reaches a certain temperature, the internal chemistry of that battery cell itself begins to decompose. It breaks down. The issue then is that the breaking down, the decomposition of the chemicals inside the cell is an exothermic reaction, meaning that the reaction releases heat when it happens, which then leads to further breaking down of adjacent chemicals inside the cell, hence thermal runaway. Some bit of heat, well, a lot of bit of heat, causes the decomposition of the chemistry inside the cell, which leads to further decomposition, which then leads to off-gassing venting, and then poof, flame. Usually the actual thermal runaway of a lithium-ion cell is rapid, very fast. The cell reaches a certain point, it can no longer sustain the heat, and it just explodes. It vents flame. But the issue is that surrounding cells then get hit with all of the ejecta from the cells, the fire and flames, and it then, like I said, cascades into other cells around it. So that brings us to the natural corollary of, are batteries dangerous? Potentially, yes, they are. That's just the reality of these power sources that are very energy dense, that hold a whole lot of energy, and in their misuse or mistreatment or abuse, they are in fact very dangerous. But they're also dangerous in a way that a car could be dangerous. Sitting there in your driveway or in a parking lot or whatever, they're just there. And a case of cells, I'll go get one. Here we go. Here's a case of cells. These are Molicel P42A, and I have a few of these left, and they are sitting there, and they are fine, and they are not hurting me or anyone else. And if I hit that with a torch or a flamethrower, or if I wrap it in some heating wire and make that go up in flames, of course, then they will be dangerous. But generally speaking, sitting here, they are not. And so that really highlights the fact that the misuse or abuse or mistreatment of lithium-ion cells or lithium-ion battery is actually what makes them dangerous, not them in and of themselves. But then we have the flip side of that, and that's the fact that very many PEV owners are relatively careless and in fact do mistreat or abuse or misuse their vehicles and therefore the lithium-ion batteries inside of them. And even more unfortunately, the majority of PEV owners don't actually know or in some cases really care about real battery safety until of course they encounter a failure themselves. I kid you not when I say I have had customers in my shops for repairs that bring something that I am shocked to have in front of me, and when I tell them that this catastrophe of a battery needs to be taken out of use and recycled, I get something along the lines of, well, I don't want to replace the whole thing right now. I will just be really careful when I use it. And then I don't even know. Now, to touch briefly on how lithium-ion batteries can fail in this way, there are a couple of reasons. Water damage can be one of them. Not necessarily because of the water itself, but because of what it does to the insulation and ancillary materials inside the pack. Okay, so this is just one example of how heat can be created inside of a battery pack. This is a cell. I believe this is a P26A. I don't know. It's long since had the wrap removed, and I was using it for welding practice. I'm honestly not even sure how much energy is left in this cell, but I know it's above empty, and maybe that'll work out for the best in this case. So this is just an 18650 cell, and usually around the top there is a insulator ring, either underneath the wrap itself or an extra one on top made out of fish paper or barley paper that serves as extra insulation between the positive and negative. And the positive is that very top button right there, and the rest of the can is negative. And they're very close, hence why there's an insulator ring. Depending on the build of the pack or what kind of life the pack has been subjected to, the condition of said insulation can vary. And it's important because if when you use metal to connect, this is a piece of nickel, which is one of the more common connecting metals used in lithium-ion battery packs. This is welded to the top of the can and it goes right across. So it sits on top of both the positive button and the shoulder, that ring on the cell. And should the metal wear through or otherwise be exposed to any other part of the can, then it will cause a short circuit, which allows everything to heat up from the large amount of current. So, all right, so, whoa, okay, so you can, all right, that's bad. This thing is already starting to vent, which is bad news. So as you can see, it is sizzling and it has welded itself to the can, and there you go. This is leaking electrolyte from the cell. And granted, this cell had already started to sort of leak electrolyte from the tip of the can, and so this cell wasn't in good condition anyway. A cell or a group of cells being in this condition is honestly not that hard to accomplish, and the insulator rings, whether they're paper and extra or not, can be worn down from vibration, which is common in PEVs. Age, just simple age combined with vibration. If there's water damage, the water can soften any of the materials in there, especially if it's fish paper, which is oddly enough one of the best abrasion resistant insulators. But if you get that wet and you combine that with age and improper use, overuse, abuse of the pack, anything like that, any combination of these things can combine to cause the insulator to wear out, which is ultimately what leads to the wearing through of these types of things. And then I also forgot to mention punctures. Punctures cause internal shorts. Dumbass me, forgot my respirator. Punctures cause internal shorts, which in severe enough an instance causes an immediate internal short circuit through the layers of the jelly roll, and they blow up also. So there's that. Isn't that nice? You know what? Let's just put her in the deep. That's better. You've also got electrochemical abuse, charging too fast, discharging too fast, overcharging, over discharging, and then attempting to recover a fully dead flat battery. I have a video on that, by the way. I'll link to it in the description below. Now, getting back to the actual product, after the testing, I did reach out to Nobleman Tech and explain to them what happened, so that way they wouldn't be blindsided by a big ball of fire appearing in their product. And I asked if they had anything that they wanted to say for me to include in this video, and of course they did. I do appreciate that their response was relatively positive, and they did mention that the bag that I tested was an early version, and they have since modified it and reinforced the seams. Now, that sounds fine, but that also means that either they sent me an early prototype that was not gonna pass a catastrophic level test anyway, which is not good because I explained to them what the test was gonna be about. Or they're just saying that for me to put in a video for reasons. And again, I do wanna mention that when I reached out to them for this bag, which they sent for free, I did tell them I was going to blow up a battery inside the bag. What they sent me is what I tested. If there is actually a revised version with reinforced seams and they redid everything, fine. That new version also needs to be tested to failure. And if for some reason you are not convinced that an actual real-world electric skateboard Fire would behave in such a way as the setup that I produced,
what the fuck? Me! Fuck me! Fucking hell! God damn! Oh shit!
Get back, give it space. Give it space. Give it space. That shit's gonna burn itself out. It's gotta burn itself out. Give it back. It's gotta burn itself out. And while a lot of this information and explanation and context might not be the most exciting content for YouTube, it is very much important because when you're doing this sort of testing, which is inherently dangerous and complicated and risky, you have to be as thorough as you possibly can because science is messy. Creating a scientific procedure, playing out the experiment, looking at the results, forming conclusions from it, and using that to hopefully have a manufacturer reproduce said testing, it all requires context, it requires information, and it requires some level of transparency with the testing methodology itself. There's simply no way around it, and although maybe some of this information doesn't necessarily interest all of you, I do think it's important to have it included in the entire piece because without it, all I have done is blown something up in a field and shown it to you. All right, let's wrap this up. This review, test, whatever, highlights something pretty important. Now, this bag, and I would be holding it for you if it wasn't destroyed in the test, this bag is advertised as a safety device. People have bought this thing already, assuming it will save their home or at least in some reasonable way put off the catastrophe that would happen if their PEV failed in an apocalyptic event.
What the fuck?
Some bought it because they watched a YouTube review with a promo code on it and they wanted to get in on the early bird pricing before it went up, and now they're using it assuming that it will save them in the night should their charging board just go up in flames. It doesn't seem to work. Is it better than nothing? I guess so. Does it give someone peace of mind? Doesn't give me any. It would be really nice if both reviewers and manufacturers did actual testing of safety devices. However, I do realize that that is not entirely practical. In reviewing a helmet or reviewing safety pads or safety gloves, not everyone is going to willingly toss themselves to the ground in order to test it and say, yes, this saved me and I only got a mild concussion instead of a medium to severe concussion. I understand that that's not practical. I understand it's not practical for everyone to just toss a whole bunch of brand new cells into a bag and make it blow up because that's expensive and it's dangerous and you need procedure and safety and research and reading. Damn, you need a lot of reading. Anyway, what can you actually do? As I've said, always supervise charging. Always. If you have a board, EC, whatever, and you have to plug it in to charge it, be around, be next to it, be in the room. The faster you can react to a potential failure, the better off you and your home and those around you are going to be. Maybe in some systems it's appropriate and safe to leave it overnight without supervision because the likelihood of failure is so low, but I run an Eskate repair and custom shop. I build custom lithium-ion batteries. I have many cases of cells and different things going on in my workshop at any given time. And so when I'm not around, be it asleep or out of the shop, everything is unplugged and disconnected and properly distanced and insulated and packed up where it should be to minimize as much risk as possible. As far as I'm concerned, if I cannot supervise it, I don't charge it. If you have something that has been in a crash, has been water damage, that is malfunctioning already, do not charge it. Do not use it. I realize that having maybe one PEV that you ride all the time, every day, and it's your work commute tool, if it doesn't work or your battery isn't functioning the way it should, it's very inconvenient. And it's easy for me to just say, don't use it anymore. The inconvenience of a battery failure is far worse than just not being able to ride something. Either contact the manufacturer or your local repair person, or have it checked by anyone that's a professional with the expertise to work on it, whether that is an independent repair shop or the manufacturer or whatever. If you have any doubt about anything that has a lithium-ion battery in it, just don't charge it and don't use it. It's not worth it. All right, I have rambled on enough. This is likely the fastest I have ever spoken in a video, and so if you had no idea what the hell I was talking about, watch the video again and set the playback speed to 75%. As always, I very much appreciate your viewership. Please stay safe in your charging and discharging of battery habits. Always stay safe while riding. Try not to fall. And most importantly, take care of yourself.